I was standing in the kitchen of my father's lake house in Wisconsin when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't sign anything tonight. Get in your car and drive home." I had no idea that the folder of papers sitting on the dining table behind me was designed to take $6 million away from me. Or that by sunrise I would be driving down a dark highway like I was running from a crime scene, about to uncover a secret my family had buried for 23 years. My name doesn't matter as much as what I do for a living. I'm a CPA who specializes in estate audits, the person companies call when they think someone's on the inside is stealing. I spend my whole career looking for the lie hidden inside a stack of legal paper. It never crossed my mind that the biggest lie of my life was sitting at my own family's dinner table. The trip had been my stepmother's idea, the way every family bonding weekend at the lake house had been her idea since I was a kid. We were there supposedly to celebrate my younger half-sister and her fiancé getting engaged. The lake house smelled like cedar and burnt citronella candles, and the four of them, my father, my stepmother, my sister, and her fiancé, were laughing too loud around the fire pit when I walked in from the porch to grab another beer from the cooler in the kitchen. That's when I saw the folder. It was sitting square in the middle of the dining table, next to my father's reading glasses and a pen he'd clearly set out on purpose. A yellow legal pad sat on top, my name written across the top tab in my stepmother's looping cursive. I picked it up without really thinking, just an audit reflex, my eyes scanning before my brain caught up. Trust modification and release. Irrevocable waiver of beneficiary interest. My stomach dropped an inch with every line I read. My father walked in behind me, a beer in each hand, his easy lake house smile already sliding into place. "Hey now, don't go reading ahead. That's just some boring estate paperwork, sweetheart. Lawyers needed it signed by everyone in the family before the wedding, something about taxes on the trust. Sign on the tabs, we'll grill the steaks, and we can all enjoy the rest of the weekend." "What trust?" I asked. My voice came out flatter than I meant it to. My stepmother appeared in the doorway like she'd been waiting just out of sight. "Honestly, do you have to make a production out of everything? It's a formality. Your father is restructuring things before your sister's wedding, so there's no tax mess for anyone. Just sign it so we can move on." I looked back down at the document, 26 pages dense with the kind of language that's deliberately built to make people's eyes glaze over before they get to the part that matters. I'd read 1,000 documents like it. This wasn't a tax form. There was no IRS schedule attached, no accountant's letterhead, no notary block filled in yet. Someone wanted my signature before any of those things existed. "I'm not signing something I haven't read in full," I said, setting the folder back down. Especially not standing in a kitchen with a beer in my hand. My sister appeared behind my stepmother, still in her engagement glow, a little flushed from the wine. "Oh my God, can you not do this tonight? Dad is just trying to make sure my wedding doesn't get tangled up in some tax nightmare, because you have to analyze every single piece of paper that crosses your desk. You're being paranoid. Nobody's trying to steal your imaginary fortune. You're an accountant, not an heiress." The old, familiar shame crawled up the back of my neck, the one I'd been carrying since I was 11 years old, and got shipped off to a boarding school upstate for something I never actually did, a fight at school that my stepmother swore I started. Though even at the time I knew the story didn't add up. I'd spent 23 years as the difficult one, the cold one, the one who never quite fit at the family table even when I was sitting right at it. My father's smile thinned out at the edges. "You're embarrassing yourself. I flew everyone up here, I'm paying for this entire weekend, and I'm asking for one signature to help your sister. Is that really too much to ask?" For one humiliating second, the 11-year-old in me wanted to just sign the thing and make the tension go away the way I always had. But the accountant in me, the version of myself I'd built brick by brick specifically so no one could ever again make me feel small over a piece of paper, knew exactly what those phrases meant. Irrevocable waiver, full release of beneficiary interest. Someone wasn't protecting a wedding. Someone was protecting themselves from me, finding out what I was owed. "I need some air," I said, and walked straight out the front door before anyone could stop me. The dock stretched out into water, gone black with the night, the moon laying a thin silver line across the surface. I stood there with my arms wrapped around myself, going over every word of that document in my head, when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The text read, "He's hiding the trust your mother set up before she died. Don't sign. Call this number when you're safe." My mother had died of a brain aneurysm when I was 2. I had no memories of her, only photographs, and the story I'd been told my whole life. that she left behind nothing but hospital debt and a husband determined to give her daughter a good life anyway. I'd built my entire understanding of myself around that story. Now a stranger was telling me it was a lie. I didn't call the number. Not yet. I needed to get off that dock, out of that house, and somewhere I could think without my stepmother's eyes tracking my every move. I went back inside, forced a wince onto my face, and told them I'd gotten a sudden migraine, the kind that knocked me flat for a day at a time, the kind they all knew about because I'd been having them since high school. My father looked annoyed. My stepmother looked suspicious. But nobody argues with a migraine at 11 at night, and 20 minutes later I was in my car, pulling out of the gravel driveway with my headlights off until I hit the county road. I drove 3 hours straight through to Milwaukee, checked into an airport hotel under a name that wasn't quite mine, my middle name and my mother's maiden name, a habit I'd picked up from work, where I'd learned that paper trails matter, and finally called the number back at 1 in the morning. A man answered. His voice was low, careful, like he was choosing each word for a reason. He told me his name was Marcus, that he used to work for my late mother's attorney before the man retired, and that he'd spent years quietly digging through old filing cabinets after the firm shut its doors. Because something about my mother's estate file had never sat right with him. Your mother had a trust, he said, funded with the proceeds of a patent she filed 2 years before she died, a water filtration system. It was worth almost nothing when she filed it. It's worth a great deal more now. I sat on the edge of that hotel bed with the air conditioner rattling and felt the entire architecture of my childhood quietly come apart. My mother, it turned out, had been an environmental engineer before she met my father, working on cheap filtration technology for communities without clean water access. She'd filed a patent on a design just before she got sick and named me, her only child, as the sole beneficiary of a trust meant to hold and grow that asset until I turned 30. My father, according to Marcus, had been listed as trustee, with a legal duty to manage the trust in my interest until I came of age to take control of it myself. Instead, 2 years after her death, he had quietly petitioned a small county court, using a sympathetic recently appointed judge and a story about my mother's unstable mental state near the end of her life, to have the trust dissolved and the assets folded into a generic family holding company he controlled. He'd built his entire empire, the real estate portfolio, the lake house, my sister's seed money for her jewelry line, the whole gleaming structure of our family's wealth, on top of my mother's patent, and on a story he told me my entire life that she'd left me nothing at all. The wedding weekend, the urgent paperwork, the lawyer pen laid out and waiting, suddenly made horrible sense. My sister's company was about to go public. Going public meant audits. Audits meant lawyers crawling through every entity my father's holding company touched, including the one quietly built on my mother's patent. If I signed that waiver, I would be permanently and irrevocably giving up any claim to an asset I didn't even know existed yet, clearing the company's books before a single outside auditor ever looked twice. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that hotel room with my laptop open, doing the only thing I actually knew how to do well. I started pulling threads. County court filings are public record if you know which county to look in, and Marcus gave me exactly that. I found the original petition my father had filed, found the judge's signature, found, buried 3 folders deep in a digital archive nobody had bothered to clean up, a campaign donation from a shell company tracing back to my father, made to that same judge's re-election fund 4 months before the ruling. It wasn't proof of anything by itself, but it was a thread, and I knew how to pull threads for a living. I spent the next 6 weeks living a kind of double life. By day, I went back to my actual job in Chicago, sat in meetings, signed off on other people's audits, smiled at coworkers who had no idea their colleague was quietly building a case against her own father. By night, I worked with Marcus and, eventually, with a forensic litigation attorney he connected me with, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diane who specialized in exactly this kind of buried inheritance fraud. We traced the patent's actual valuation through licensing deals my father's company had quietly signed over the years, deals that used the filtration technology under a generic corporate name so that no one outside a tight circle would ever connect it back to my mother. We traced the campaign donation through 3 shell entities until it landed, unmistakably, on my father's personal signature. The hardest part wasn't the financial trail. I was built for that. The hardest part was the moment, 3 weeks in, when my sister called me, crying, asking why I'd disappeared from the family group chat, why I'd missed her bridal shower, what was wrong with me. I sat in my car outside my own apartment and almost told her everything. I almost let 23 years of wanting to belong somewhere pull me back into silence. Then I thought about my mother, 26 years old, sitting at some borrowed desk somewhere, filing a patent for clean water because she wanted to leave something good in the world, never imagining that the man she married would turn her legacy into a weapon to keep using against her own child. I told my sister I had a work emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. By the time Diane filed the petition to reopen the original trust dissolution, we had the patent valuation, the licensing revenue trail, the judicial campaign donation, and sworn testimony from my mother's original attorney, 81 years old now and furious. It turned out that his old client's wishes had been quietly erased while he wasn't paying attention. The county judge who'd approved the original dissolution had since retired in disgrace over an unrelated bribery case, which meant nobody had any institutional interest left in protecting that earlier ruling. My father found out the petition had been filed the same week, ironically, that his company's external auditors started their pre-IPO review of my sister's jewelry brand. He called me 11 times in one day. I didn't answer until the 12th. "You're going to destroy this family over money you didn't even know you had a week ago," he said, his voice shaking with a fury I'd never heard from him before. Not even when I was 11 and supposedly pushed my sister off a swing set, the story that got me sent away from home in the first place. "No," I told him. "You destroyed this family 23 years ago. I'm just finally doing the audit." The case took 14 months. It wasn't the dramatic courtroom reckoning you see in movies. It was depositions and document productions, and one very long, very quiet afternoon where my father sat across a conference table from me and Diane and admitted, on the advice of counsel trying to avoid a far worse outcome, to the donation, to the petition, to all of it. The settlement restored the trust, reinstated me as sole beneficiary with full retroactive accounting of 14 years of licensing revenue, and required my father's holding company to pay back, with interest, every dollar of value it had extracted from my mother's patent. The total came to just under $6 million. My sister didn't speak to me for almost a year. Her wedding happened without me. I won't pretend that didn't hurt, even after everything. Some family bonds don't survive the truth, and I had to learn to be at peace with that instead of waiting for an apology that was never going to come. What I didn't expect was Marcus. He never wanted anything from me, not a cut of the settlement, not even much credit. He'd done it, he told me once, over coffee in a small shop near his retirement condo in Madison, because he'd spent 30 years in estate law watching people with power quietly erase the wishes of people who'd died too soon to defend themselves, and my mother's file was the one he'd never been able to let go of. He had a granddaughter, it turned out, going through her own custody fight with a father who'd hidden assets from her mother, and somewhere in those months of late-night phone calls and shared documents, what started as a stranger's tip became something closer to family. I set up a small trust for his granddaughter's education myself, not because he asked, but because I understood now exactly what it meant to have someone fight for you, with no guarantee they'd ever be thanked for it. I bought a house outside Madison the following spring, nothing showy, just a quiet place with good light and a view of the lake from the kitchen window. I keep a photo of my mother on the windowsill above the sink, the only one I have where she's smiling at the camera instead of looking down at her work, taken the year before she filed the patent that would, decades later, quietly hand me back my own life. I still talk to a therapist most weeks. The 11-year-old who got sent away still shows up sometimes, especially around the holidays, still flinches at raised voices at dinner tables that aren't even mine anymore. But I've stopped waiting for my father to apologize, and I've stopped needing my sister to choose me over the version of our family that was easier to believe in. I learned, the hard way, that blood doesn't automatically mean loyalty, and that the people who actually show up for you in the dark, the Marcuses of the world, asking nothing in return, are the real family you get to choose. I think about my mother often now, not as the absence I grew up believing she was, but as someone who tried, in the only way she had left, to make sure I'd be taken care of even after she was gone. My father spent 2 decades trying to convince me she'd left me nothing. He was wrong about almost everything else, but he was most wrong about that. She left me everything that actually mattered. It just took me 23 years, one strange text message, and a folder of papers on a dining room table to finally go looking for it.